Yesterday, YouTube recommended to me a video by David Starkey entitled Academic Freedom. And as an academic and someone who is strongly against attempts to limit academic freedom, I was very interested to hear what Mr. Starkey had to say, especially because I knew that he had been unfairly censored in the past. But I must say I was rather disappointed in how little Mr. Starkey had to say about academic freedom. As a philosophy professor, I am compelled to offer a rebuttal against the implied strawman argument at the center of Mr. Starkey's talk. For those of you who don't know who David Starkey is, he's an English historian who busies himself mostly with talking about the lives of past royal family members. He's perfectly fine as far as he goes, but he's lately been entering the culture wars, this kind of manufactured battlefield of the right wing. And his comments regarding academia, and his comments specifically about philosophy and social sciences, I need to respond to. Because while Mr. Starkey will never watch this, and none of his fans will ever leave their silo to look at this and hear what I have to say, everything is a valuable teaching moment, and I am a teacher at heart. So what this is about, the straw man argument that Mr. Starkey provides, is about reality. Mr. Starkey begins his talk and frames his pseudo-discussion on academic freedom with a story that he claims he had a conversation with an interesting young man who had an expensive, fashionable education. And he's claimed that the expensive, fashionably educated young man was shocked at the idea that there is an objective reality, as though he had never heard this concept before, according to Mr. Starkey. And Mr. Starkey then went on to say that, this is a problem with the education system because education and philosophy and sciences and social sciences, they only teach relativism. Well, what do academics teach about truth and reality? Well, I don't have an expensive, fashionable education. I only have a mere PhD from a non-Oxbridge English university. But in my education and 20-odd years of teaching at the university level, I have very seldom run into people who have the views that Mr. Starkey imputed to this interesting young man. These people do exist, I grant that. These people that think that there is no truth at all, everything is relative, everything is just I get to make up whatever I want to do, whatever I want to believe is fine for me. But these people tend to not be well read, they tend to not be well educated, and it's rather disingenuous for Mr. Starkey to blame higher education for their ignorance. In philosophy, which is the academic field in which I am qualified, and I will confine my comments to philosophy the rest of the way, there is no broad denial of objective reality. There isn't. There is a healthy skepticism of people claiming to have absolute certain knowledge of objective reality. When philosophers talk about relativism, it is in terms of how perspectives color our experiences, and experiences color our perceptions. It seems quite bizarre to deny that those two realities are true. When philosophers such as David Hume or William James criticize the concept of truth, they're critiquing the notions that truths are handed down to us by God, such as in divine command ethics. And philosophers condemn the notion that anyone can be so smug in their assertions that they consider themselves to be above questioning. Philosophers also delineate between objective truths and social truths. The distinction being that the latter, social truths, change over time, another fact that it would be absolutely absurd to deny. The problem philosophers frequently point to is when people speak and act on their perspectives, pretending that these perspectives are objective realities. I refer to such proclamation as all homosexuals are perverted pedophiles, and those who voted for Brexit are all fascists. We can easily think of many more such proclamations from all sides and all perspectives. In short, in philosophy, and probably in academia in general, there isn't a push for relativism. There is a rejection of dogmatic judgments. Philosophers like John Dewey and Jürgen Habermas call for dialogue, coming together, communicating and working together to discover what is true. And strangely, it is that call for dialogue that is frequently the target of dogmatic people, the ones who do want to limit academic freedom, to silence the dialogue, to silence the discussion. They want us educators to be limited to only teaching a particular set of perspectives, a particular set of dogmatic truths. They use the epithet of relativism as a stalking horse, when their actual intent is to stop us from affirming the reality that students can and should apply critical thinking to everything they read and everything they hear, and especially to what they think. That's academic freedom. Thus, when Starkey mentions that, oh, well, there's this feminist author who suddenly has written a book about appeal to reality, and he wants to wade into the whole transgender thing, which I've talked about, written about elsewhere, and I'm not going to get into it right now. But this idea that somehow people within philosophy and gender studies have suddenly discovered reality is just absurd nonsense. It's a straw man. And Don Quixote tilting at this imaginary windmill of relativism it's beneath the pale. I'm sorry. Because aside from a few French writers who took the wrong lessons from 1968 and Nietzsche on one of his grumpy days, no one denies reality. No one thinks that, well, whatever you want to believe, that's okay. No, that type of dren is what gets us into trouble. So please don't do that, Mr. Starkey, and Mr. and Ms. anyone else that wants to limit academic freedom because they think that no one else should think other than how they think.